Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. Joining me is Coleman Hodges, the man on the scene, SwimSwam's head of production. And also joining us today is probably the most versatile swimmer in swimming, the man who has touched all points of history in our sport, NCAA champion, world champion, Olympic champion, Davis Tarwater.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
USA Swimming board member. How long are you going to be on the board?
My term ends this September. I've been on the board since 2016. It's been an interesting experience. Obviously, there's been some notable changes, but more than anything, it's just been great to be able to get back to the sport.
Is that something that you want to continue? Do you always want to be involved at the governing body level?
You know, I'd love to, not maybe at the governing body level. I think that I've been a part of some really important, meaningful, good transition. But I'm looking to kind of move on, and the way it's structured now, it's, I think, really important to have some athletes on there that are maybe just a little bit closer to their own athletic career and those experiences. So we'll see kind of who comes out of the new nomination process, but I'm really hopeful for the future. And I obviously have so much respect for the athletes I've served with, Maya Dorado and Natalie Coughlin. They're just such unbelievable standard bearers for our sport, and they've just done a great job. So probably time to let some new people have their shot at it.
Well, I hope that you continue at a leadership level. I think that we need you, but I want to go back to, I'm going to explain to everybody why that's the case. There's digging into your background. I am so sorry I didn't know this, but it's going back to the very beginning. I didn't know that you suffered from epilepsy when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And how was that something that you were sensitive to, aware of, and how long did it go on?
Yeah, you know, that's I'm glad you bring that up, because you know, that was one part of my story that was at times somewhat difficult to talk about. And I had my first seizure, I believe, when I was 8 or 9, and was hospitalized for a period of time. And then the second seizure that I had actually happened on the pool deck in Nashville at the Tracy Calkins pool when I was at an age group meet there. And, you know, there was a period of time where, you know, I think that my parents were pretty concerned about, you know, putting me back in the water, and, you know, I had to be monitored, and, you know, thankfully I didn't have an event in the water. But, you know, I think that just having that experience and having it be a public thing, and being so young, I think it sort of it created, you know, even looking back at being 10, as much as you can remember being 10, that's 2.5 decades ago. I think it really drove in some intensity and toughness that only adversity can. And I really remember that shift at even a really young age.
My mom suffered from epilepsy, and I witnessed some moments that were extremely frightening. I can't imagine being in a pool, in a water environment, and that being something that can happen. Mm-hmm. It's you know, what's interesting though about people who suffer from this is, like, you look back through history, and a lot of our greatest leaders and a lot of people who shifted all of humanity suffered from this. And it's I don't know if that was ever told to you or shared with you. Did anyone tell you that?
You know, I tried to have positive role models, and my parents did, you know, give me some examples of people that, you know, had suffered from that. And, you know, going, you know, kind of how it was explained to me is that, you know, there's a high percentage of people who have epilepsy that it resolves itself at puberty, and there's a percentage that doesn't. And fortunately, I was in the group of people that it did resolve itself, and so at about 14 or so, began to have normalized EEGs, and then was able to wean off my medication, and by the grace of God, haven't had a seizure since my early, I guess it wouldn't be teenage years, but 10 or 11.
What's interesting about you is that, and I didn't know that, but I had a passing understanding of your family history. I knew you came from a great family. Your dad's an attorney, well-respected attorney, and I knew about your was it Richard Flowers Sr., the Attorney General. I knew that you had somebody with political power in your history in the South. So it was the Attorney General of Alabama, and I knew, so his son, I heard this from our mutual friend, Don Bosch, who's an attorney and a big supporter of swimming nationally, but also in the Tennessee area. But he had told me about Richard Flowers Jr., who was a world champion in the 110-meter hurdles. And I understand that in many ways he was a mentor to you. Were you close to him at a very young age, or did the relationship develop as you became an elite athlete?
No, he's been a part of my life for a long time. And so my grandfather, Richmond, was the Attorney General, as you say, of the state of Alabama. And that was at a time where the civil rights movement was, at its sort of most intense point in the state of Alabama. And actually, my grandfather went to law school with George Wallace, who at that time was the governor. And my grandfather was a civil rights hero. I would consider him to be a civil rights hero. And, he opposed when the governor opposed integration of schools, my grandfather was very influential in upholding the law of the land, which was the integration of the school system. And as a result of that, received a lot of, really negative, violent sort of blowback from that. And, crosses were burned in the front yard. And when it came time, to go through, the recruiting process, and, Bear Bryant was recruiting my uncle to play football at Alabama and run track. I think those were some interesting considerations. And I think, without putting words in his mouth, a contributing factor as to, maybe why he and his brother and ultimately my late mother ended up at the University of Tennessee. He was a standout football player for Tennessee, but his real love was track and field. And he was one of the best hurdlers, if not the best hurdler in the world, leading into the, I guess would have been the Mexico City Olympic Games and those trials. And he pulled his hamstring right before the trials and ended up fourth, which was one spot out of making the team in track. And, I believe that even in swimming at that time, three people made the team, three individuals made the team. And that really impacted him. It was a devastating blow. And so he ultimately had a nice career in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys, I believe it was. And, but, track was his love. The Olympic movement was more of his love than collegiate or professional football. And so having someone that shared that love for the Olympic movement and, had been through trials and that kind of thing, it was something that, that was, unique experience that, I was really fortunate to have.
it's you have this long story journey in swimming, and a lot of people probably don't know this about you because you became really royalty on deck for years and years and years. And it was basically,
Royalty, you know.
well, in my world, you're royalty.
Yeah, maybe like the court jester.
I wouldn't put it that way. I have very, very clear-cut opinions about your swimming career, and I'll preface it by saying this: I think that you're an athlete who, yes, you achieved the Olympic medal, world championship, NCAA title, but you're always right there on the cusp of breaking out and being somebody who won multiple medals and could be a factor across a lot of different events. And I think that my personal opinion in the aftermath is like, hey, once you're a gold medalist, you're a gold medalist for the rest of your life. But if you want to dig into the nitty gritty, it's you probably had some personal hurdles. I think that sometimes when someone's a really smart person, they can overthink things. I think sometimes they come to realize their talent, and even though they've had this long story journey in the sport, you sort of go through that chute probably a year or two too late, and I'll get to that. Let's go back to childhood. You were a distance freestyler. You were a hardcore distance freestyler. To really put to dot the I's and cross the T's. You're a peer of Michael Phelps, and when you went to junior national championships, you beat him. And so it's that's right. So what was your life like? Were you doing hard training throughout your age group and formative years? What would it look like at that time?
Yeah, so I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, swam for Pilot Aquatic Club, which is now Tennessee Aquatics, and my club coach was a guy named Gardner Howland, who was a really well respected coach. He's actually back in Knoxville, which is great to have him. He's a great friend of mine, and I would say that he took a pretty reasonable and moderated approach to things. I wouldn't say that my training in my high school years was, on the, you hear some really, crazy anecdotes about, stuff that distance swimmers did. And I would say it was a very solid approach. And, kind of as I grew and got, more physically developed, that trajectory in terms of my, my events sort of started moving from the 1500, kind of down to the 800, the 400, the 200, and then butterflies. But, I think he told me a stat that I either didn't know or didn't remember, but when I was 16, I was in the top 16 rankings in every event 50 through the mile. And, so it wasn't like I didn't have the ability to get up and, do some quicker things, but I do think that rooting as a distance swimmer sustained me throughout my entire career. It was just, I never thought of myself. I always kind of had that mentality, that hard hat mentality of, you got to do the work. And I think it was, something that, was really beneficial for me.
It's to let our audience know, I was at the University of Tennessee, and we have a lot of mutual friends, including your coach and including a mutual friend, Don Bosch, who's a supporter of the teams in the area. But I sort of lived in the oxygen of Davis Tarwater and your development. So I was constantly getting updates from everyone. It's like, Davis did this, Davis did that. And enjoyed that process. But most what I heard in terms of feedback was that you're a hammer. Like anything that's thrown at you, you take it and you spit it back out, and you do more than what people anticipated. And you had this work ethic that netted you success early on, like what you talked about. Top 16, 50 to the 1500. By the time you went to Olympic trials 4 times, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012. You had great success 2000 to 2004. You were already among the top athletes in the world. Where was your mindset, from 2000 to 2004?
Well, first, being in the oxygen of Davis Tarwater, I think it's important to note that, growing up, I was inspired by watching your journey in, '92, and, I had a poster of you in my room, and, I remember being up at the pool and seeing you, working out, and I even wrote you, I think, like a get well card when you got some kind of injury or something. I remember, doing that, and, so it's I say that not to just be like, let's have a 10-minute session where we tell each other how much we like each other, but more so than to say, I think it's you can never underestimate who you're going to inspire, and what the benefit of being able to be tangential to greatness is, to elite athletes, and to be able to. It's one thing to read about it or to click on SwimSwam, but it's another thing to see it firsthand, see what that preparation looks like, and see what it means to come in every day and be a professional. And that was something that was important to me. And so to kind of answer your question, is I graduated from high school in 2002, and we had started I was always a good butterflyer, but I had some sort of technical things that I was kind of trying to work out, and kind of really came together my senior year in high school. Instead of swimming the 200 free at our high school state meet, I swam the 100 fly, and was, I think, 48.0, and was one of the top. At that time, the only guy that went faster was a guy named Michael Kavik, who ended up having a pretty good career. And kind of when I got to Michigan, really began to explore that. And that was a period of time where Tom Malchow, the defending Olympic gold medalist and world record holder, was training for his, I guess it would have been his third Olympiad. And he was kind of a little older, and he was, maybe 26 or so, 27 when he made that team. And, we just kind of became training partners, and I learned a lot from him. And the time drops started coming really, really fast, especially in the long course 200 fly. Just back when going 157 was good. Now it's like woohoo. But I kind of went into the 2004 trials with not a ton of expectations, 20 years old, and really kind of new, not necessarily new to the event, but new to some semblance of mastery of it.
What's interesting, as I said before, you were at the epicenter of swim history, training with Tom Malchow, coached by John Urbanchek, then and then of course Bowman comes in and takes over, and then suddenly your training partner, you have from Malchow to Michael Phelps. And yes, there was a period of time where you were popping 157s, 200 fly, but you came to 200 fly late. And a lot of people who have great success do it for a long, long time, and they can't get through that chute and make big drops. But you started making big drops. It's hard to go from 157 to 154. And I think that, it's a big buildup, but I'll say this. You got down to 141, 200 fly. My personal opinion is, if you had started your focus on 200 fly earlier, probably when you were supposed to, I think you'd have gone to 139. I think you obviously had that in you. And but it's like, it just wasn't in the consciousness of of swimming at the time. But, so I'd like to know what was the shift from Urbanchek to Bob Bowman, and to were you in the lane with Phelps?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, Bob took over the fall of 2004. And, that's when Michael came. And, at that point we had still a really great, core there. We had Cleet Keller, we had Peter Vanderkay, Christy Young. We had some, really, really solid guys. And obviously, Michael steps that up, is the greatest ever. So I think the transition was, in terms of training, pretty smooth. I think they had a lot of similar ideas about how to roll a training plan out. And John was still he was still around. He was still on deck and helpful to some extent. Not as he wasn't on deck as much as he was, but I think Bob did some things differently in terms of just power, and his idea was on the sport were a little bit different than John's, and I don't want to speak for that, but I think that a lot of the development from 2004 to 2008 really happened in the 2 years that I was a pro, from 2006 to 2008, and just a little bit more mature, a little bit more physically mature, and having the ability to kind of focus, on training in a more professional way.
So let's get right to it. What suit did you wear in 2008 at trials?
I wore the Speedo laser, just the legs only.
Yeah, and at the time, swimmers were, the rubberized flotation suits were taken off. Laser Racer still had some permeation panels, and you weren't wearing full body, probably, I'm guessing, because you didn't like the way it affected your reach. Is that correct? Why did you only go legs?
Yeah, that was a lot of it. I think when we look back on those 2 years of the sport, they came on so quickly. The new technology came on so quickly that it was really difficult to acclimate to it in a short period of time. And I just don't think we knew, as much as maybe we know now in terms of, how that, what the different materials were, what the different flotations were. And a lot of it had to do with just individual body types and how you fit in those suits. And I mean, I remember going to the 2009 World Championship trials and having like 4 different suits in my bag, and trying to figure out which one went with which event. And so, yeah, I mean, at the time I felt like it was really hard for me to, feel that extension on the front part of my stroke, with the chest piece. And it's just, I got more comfortable with it, and you had to adapt, but at that time we just hadn't been out long enough.
Let's just get right to it. I mean, you were 154, and I remember seeing you on deck in 2008 thinking, oh my God. I mean, I was so proud. I was like, oh my God, 154 heading into the finals. And you got nudged. Phelps won. Stovall was in a full body suit, blue 70, and he edged you. And that was probably the toughest third place finish that I had ever experienced, where it wasn't my race, because I got third in 96 trials. But and I understand the feeling of that. But like seeing you do it, it was triggering. It was like, oh my God, that was so painful. It's that happened to you. You actually thought about stopping swimming after that event, with more races left in trials. Is that correct?
I really don't think that crossed my mind. I came out and had a pretty good 100 fly. The 100 fly was what I had left. And, I've got a ton of respect for Gil, and I would never say that, the suit had anything to do with it. I was beaten by a better athlete on a day that had a better swim. And, he deserved to be there. And he's from Tennessee. We've raced each other. We had raced each other our whole lives, and he had a really great year, and he had a really great swim. And I'm out. there was a place where, as devastating as it was for me, I was able to lucidly see through the fact that, like, he got up and got the job done, and hats off to him, happy for him. And so it just, I wanted to finish the meet, but realistically thinking of Phelps and Crocker in the 100 fly, and being where I was in the 100 fly at that point, it was just knew I was going to have a little bit of a uphill battle.
Well, let's just bottom line it. Nothing against Gil Stovall. We love Gil Stovall. He was the NC2A champion, became the NC2A record holder, and he had a great trial swim. He did wear a full body suit, Blue 70, and you wore legs. But everyone swam fast. That's an extraordinary time. We've got about 10 minutes left. I just want to get into this. So 2008 to 2012, I thought that you considered retiring for a period of time after 2008.
Yeah, well, I did. So I considered retiring, right after the trials, and kind of got some thoughts about it. And I remember reaching out to Eric Wunderlich, who was a Michigan guy and 96 Olympian, and him just saying, look, right now take some time to do the things that you want to do, like figure out like who you are, and just clear your head, like go on a trip, do some stuff. And I remember my family went to Costa Rica. That was something I always wanted to do, and that was a blessing. And I decided to kind of come back that year. I had a little bit of time left on my Speedo contract, which looking back on, I probably could have done without that remaining amount. But I kind of was living in Knoxville, was living at home, and just thought, I think that there's a little more in the tank here. And so I was applying to grad schools, and ultimately got in overseas at the University of Oxford. And so that kind of put a terminal date on my swimming career. And so I came to Matt Kretich, who was the head coach of the Lady Vol swim team at the time, and only the women, and just said, hey, look, do you have a volunteer assistant position open? I'd like to just do things differently. I'd like to explore the freestyles. I'd like to just kind of gut everything. I just want to relearn, and I just want to, get in the film room. I want to do things differently, and I want to, try a different training, strategy approach. And so for that whole year, Keenan Robinson, who was still at Michigan at the time, is now the I guess he's a high performance director at USA Swimming, helped install a new weight training plan. I put on a lot of weight, and relearned how to swim freestyle, and it took a little while, and ultimately went to the 2009 World Championship trials, and had a enormous drop in the 200 free, down to 146 low. Then went to the World Championships in Rome in 2009, which was just like a total circus. This has been well documented, with all the world records got shattered, and then did, for all intents and purposes, walk away and move to England, and actually swam a little bit there as a part of their college team. Their rules are a little bit different, and I did win their version of NCAA's on a couple days a week of training in the 100 back, of all things. So that experience was great, but I mainly did that just because I wanted to be known as an Oxford Blue and get a cool jacket and be a part of the gentleman's dinner.
We just pulled out for a second. He's frozen on his. There you go. There, you're back.
Yeah.
So no, that's cool. You dropped out for a second, but that's all right. So we've got about 8 minutes left, and we want to get into 2012. 2012 Olympic trials was one of the most dramatic experiences that I've ever had as a fan. And so can you take us through? Can you sum it up? You know, your experience there to to the last event, to the 4x2 free.
Yeah. So, when I came back to school, talked to Creditch, we decided that it made the most sense for me to go train with David Marsh, in sort of that high performance group. And it was a great group. We ended up putting 5 people on the Olympic team. And, David really helped me, kind of relearn some things, develop some speed. And that was a great experience. He's a great coach. And so when we went to trials, we actually didn't know what we were going to swim. And so the day before the 200 free, I hadn't had a great 200 free in a while. And so the day before I said, hey, should we scratch this? Because it conflicts with the 200 fly. They're on the same, they're not on the finals for the 200 free would have been the semis for the 200 fly. And so it's just made for a really heavy workload. And so he said, no, just, go out in prelims, go out hard, see what comes of it. And so went through prelims, went through semis, and then, qualified 7th for the finals, and then ended up getting 7th by a 10th. And so that was devastating. Was, I think, 4th in the 200 fly the next night. And then, actually had a little bit higher hopes in the 100 fly just because I was better at it this time around, and ended up 4th again. And so I just kind of said, hey, it's probably, I'm not going to, hang around for the mile and watch, the team get put on. It's probably such a different mindset in 2012 and 2008, and just said, it just felt differently. It was disappointing, but there was nothing I could have done differently, in my opinion. I'd done the work. I had, gutted my training plan and my strokes, my approach, and had a different view of myself and how I fit within the world and within the swimming community, and just said, this has been great. Thanks. On to the next thing. And flew home the next morning. Then Marsh called me and said, hey man, you're, Phelps has dropped out of the 200 free. We don't know what that means. Hang tight. And then ended up calling me 20 minutes later. And I just still remember, him saying, Davis, you're an Olympian. Come on back. Got back on the next flight to Omaha, and that was a really cool experience.
And went on and became an Olympic champion. Probably one of the most dramatic stories in swimming. And it's what's interesting is that your trials, your entire trials lineup was one of the most dramatic, because it wasn't that you were getting 4th and you were right on the bubble. It's that you had, after training with Marsh, you had so much speed and so much easy speed. It's like you were out and after it, and then it looked like you were just hanging on at the end. It looked like you had enormous easy speed, and then it was you didn't have maybe that 15 meters at the end. Did it feel that way?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. What it felt like was I had never felt that kind of speed before, ever. And I didn't know how to handle it, I think. And I didn't know how to kind of periodize the race. And I think one of the swims that I'm most proud of is one that nobody, except for the Olympic team, ever saw. But training camp, oddly enough, full circle, was in Knoxville. And there were tons of people just lined up around the block to come in. And so I had a time trial, 100 free. I didn't swim the 100 meter free at trials. And Marsh was like, we're going to come in this morning. We're going to have a 100 free time trial. Just going to put you on the blocks. We're going to put the touch pad in. And because it was my hometown, I stayed till the end of the line because it was just so important that, I recognized this community's support of me. So we moved the time trial to that evening. And so I warmed up, put my suit on, still, unshaved, and on the clock was 48:78 in the 100-meter free. And I think some people were looking around like, is that going to play? Like, but it was just sort of a testament to the fact that there was like a lot of speed in there. I didn't even know what to do with, and it just came on kind of so fast that I think even.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
That's all right. We lost a little bit of connection. So you had crazy speed. We're down to 2 minutes left. I just want to note this. Do you have any advice in 60 seconds for anyone who's going through this Olympic journey and they've always been on the cusp, they've been on the bubble, and they've had a similar experience? What is the takeaway wisdom from Davis Tarwater, the man who made it to the end and won gold?
I would just say, all your perceived failures are avenues for information, and never stop learning, never stop growing, never stop tweaking, never stop being, courageous and dialed in and intuitive enough to take information that you're given and respond to it in a positive way. It's not just about coming in and doing the same things and working out over and over again. Like, to get over that hump requires doing something differently and taking a chance. And a lot of times when you get to that high level, it's really hard to say, okay, I'm gonna tweak this. I'm gonna do something differently, because there's always a risk. And what I found is that if it's underpinned by just a belief and a confidence and your ability and your coaching of your coaches around you and information, most often it yields success.
Hey, do you love SwimSwam as much as I do? Do you want hours of endless practice footage, race video, and a guide to the best pancakeries in the country? Then subscribe to our YouTube channel below. And follow us on social media at SwimSwam News on Twitter and Instagram. If we get 1 million followers, I might just eat 1 million pancakes. Only one way to find out.